I recently embarked on Holland America Eurodam to host one of my group cruises, and it was with some trepidation because I'd had past fans of Holland America telling me they were falling out of love with the cruise line based on 3 recent changes. So I actually felt this would be a perfect opportunity to put these 3 things to the test because I could tap into the thoughts of everybody on my group cruise. And based on what we discovered, you're going to hear where we found the concerns about Holland America are right, where they're not, and why. So welcome aboard. I'm Gary Bembridge, helping you to get cruising on Holland America right. Let's start with the most contentious issue of all, which is that Holland America are actively trying to attract a different cruise passenger at the expense of those in the recent past. They're trying to get more families to cruise with them by offering and advertising lower family fares and even having children traveling for free sometimes when sharing parents' cabin. This is challenging for some of my channel followers. For example, Heather. She's a school teacher and she asked me if I had any close alternatives to Holland America in terms of the kind of overall onboard experience and price, because she must cruise in school holidays and was now finding that Holland America is much less adult focused. It's packed with kids during school holidays. Now, I've actually experienced this myself. We had over 400 kids aged 17 and under when I cruised on Koningsdam over a recent Christmas. Holland America used to be pretty much a adult-only line, although it never had any age limits and has always allowed kids on board. But it tended to attract couples, often 60 plus, with a more classic and traditional cruise ship and daily program. And it was actually pretty unusual to have families and kids on board Holland America. In fact, many people used to joke about Holland America being a really dull line for elderly people with little going on after 9 p.m, although that wasn't my experience. It is clear though that they are trying to broaden their appeal to attract more of the fastest growing family and multi-generational cruiser segment. Based on the people on my group cruise and my own recent experiences of cruising on Holland America, we felt there were 3 critical things that people worried about this should absolutely know about. First of all, we know people can get the classic and almost adult-only experience on Holland America's more exotic and longer cruises because of long-haul flights, location, and importantly, the cruise length. For example, I went on a 2-week South America trip on the Dam last year, and other than a kind of a smattering of toddlers, it was pretty much an adult-only cruise and experience. Which brings me to the next point, which follows on from that. If you want to have a more adult experience on Holland America, you do need to avoid school and major public holidays in popular regions like the Caribbean and the Mediterranean these days. This is even more key if you're looking at any of Holland America cruises that have regional departures. So for example, that Koningsdam cruise that I mentioned with over 400 kids, it sailed out of San Diego. Now on the West Coast, there are way fewer choices of cruise lines and departures for families to choose from, so not surprisingly, Holland America became much higher on their list. Next, building on that and based on all our experiences, you should absolutely assume that Alaska cruises are also likely to have a high number of families on board throughout the season. Holland America is one of the leading and expert cruise lines in Alaska. They've been there for well over 75 years. They are one of the few lines that have rights to call into Glacier Bay, an absolute must in Alaska in my view. That makes them a really popular choice for everybody. And critically, Alaska is a really popular multi-generational trip. So Holland America works really well for grandparents, parents, and their kids who want an affordable but premium cruise experience versus a megaship resort one. So the point I made to Heather, the teacher I mentioned earlier, looking for a close alternative to Holland America with few kids in school holiday time, is there isn't really one at all, in fact, because Holland America operates in what the cruise industry calls the premium category, which also includes Celebrity, Cunard, Princess, and Disney. All of those lines have many families on board these days too. The only adult line in the premium category is Virgin Voyages. But in my view, that's not a close alternative to Holland America because Virgin has a more out there, quirky, kind of youthful party vibe, very different. To have a similar experience and an adult only or mostly adult in the main cruising regions at school vacation time means having to look at the small ship luxury lines, which of course are way more expensive. Viking is an adult only line in that category, but other small ship lines like Azamara and Windstar tend to have fewer kids, as of course they're even more expensive, ultra-luxury lines like Seabourn, Regent Seven Seas, and those sort of lines. So it seems to me, and those are my group, that while it's still possible to have a mostly adult experience on Holland America, it is true that it's not guaranteed everywhere as it used to be in the past. Which leads me to the next big issue I've seen many people complain about, and it's possibly a consequence of this shift in emphasis. And that's around entertainment, and especially a change that has pretty much enraged and also confused past loyal fans. I get and see many complaints that range from there's virtually no entertainment to the offering is rather dull and uninspiring compared to the competitors, through to one massive, big issue, which is the scrapping of the previously always busy Lincoln Center stage and a lack now of classical music on board the ships. Now, many people say to me that they chose Holland America because of their partnership with the Lincoln Center stage and the multiple daily classic recitals that took place there. One of Holland America's point of difference in recent years was the music walk. They had 4 key partnerships and venues: B.B. King's Blues Club, the Rolling Stone Rock Room, playing rock of course, Billboard on Board, 2 pianists playing various kind of theme sets through the evening, and Lincoln Center Stage, which was classical music. But there's been changes that past Holland America fans are definitely not happy about. Lincoln Center Stage partnership has ended and the venue itself scrapped. And based on recent announcements, there is going to be very limited classical music on Holland America ships, which has really kind of annoyed people who love it. In fact, it seems there will only be live classical music trio on selected European voyages on the main stage, and then on longer voyages in the Explorer's Lounge, so a big reduction in classical music. Another side effect is the popular BBC Earth concert playing the score against footage from the famous David Attenborough wildlife show can basically, it looks like, no longer be run because the Lincoln Center Stage musicians were required for that performance. Also, they have made other changes to the music walk. While B.B. King's Blues Club, Rolling Stone Rock Room and Billboard on Board survive as standalone venues on the 3 new and larger Pinnacle class ships, so that's the Koningsdam, the New Statendam and the Rotterdam. But on the 6 Vista and Signature class ships, they have changed B.B. King's into a Rolling Stone Lounge, which has a 6-piece band playing a mix of rock and pop mostly, and they still have Billboard on board on those ships. Another thing I see growing as an issue by regular Holland America cruisers is, like with the music walk, there's no longer consistent Holland America entertainment across all the ships in the fleet, and it's going to depend increasingly on what ship and in fact even where you're sailing on Holland America. Now, personally, I'm actually quite pleased with some of the change because they're bringing back the more song and dance review style shows that they had seemed to move away from when they really sort of dialed into the dance-only shows with the Step One Dance Company. 4 new shows are being rolled out across the fleet. They include things like Song and Dance, which is based on Broadway Hollywood songs, Class Act, which celebrates iconic female performance, and Hey Mr. DJ, kind of a cavalcade of songs from the 60s through to pop hits of more recent days, kind of linked to kind of radio DJs. The second thing they're doing is focusing more on regional shows. So in the Caribbean, you're more likely to see orchestral steel drum concerts called Island Magic. If you're going to Canada and New England, a show called Brett and Thunder with Nova Scotia music. In Europe, you're going to get string music and European tenors with shows called Cordial Chamber Trio and the Pantheon. In Alaska, they're still going to focus very much on the Step One Dance Company with their kind of dance and video projection shows. Although they seem to have walked largely away from classical music, we all felt on the group that overall live music is still a big part of Holland America, and the way they do it is a plus and a point of difference versus many cruise lines and their competitors. But for classical lovers, this is not good news, and I can see why they're not happy. There is, though, one other factor that I think is an issue when it comes to entertainment, which is now, it's weaker definitely for me as a long-time Holland America passenger, and I feel they're less good on enrichment. On most cruises, they run these corporate scripted set-piece talks, which are visually quite striking, and they're given by the cruise director. They cover things like Holland America history, but other general topics that are not linked to the destination. They're just kind of these set pieces. However, coming back to the importance of those exotic cruises I spoke about earlier, they do seem to treat those differently. So on that South America cruise that I was talking about, they had an outstanding enrichment program and speaker in the form of the cruise director, Kevin, who he lives in Argentina. He comes on for the South American season and ran both, of course, the cruise director sailing stuff, but delivered incredibly detailed port and historical talks. They were incredible. I mentioned a few times, by the way, about the difference based on the ship you're on. And this is where the third area of concerns or issues are getting raised by long-term Holland America cruisers. And that is the move into bigger ships and the consequences of that. But before I get into that, if you enjoy my content and tips, consider becoming a YouTube channel member or Patreon patron. It costs just from $2 a month, and you'll get exclusive bonus content like on-cruise and channel behind-the-scene videos, group cruise priority bookings, ebooks to download, loads of bonus cruising tips. So you just click on join on YouTube below any of my videos, or you visit patreon.com/travelers to find out more. Now, back to Holland America. During the pandemic, Holland America sold their smaller ships. However, I think there are many positives in what has actually happened to the fleet, and many of the people on the group agreed with me. At the time of recording, Holland America has 11 ships in the fleet with 4 different classes, the most recent being the Pinnacle class. That carries 2,666 guests with New Statendam, Rotterdam and the Koningsdam. Then they have what's known as signature class ships, which take 2,104 guests, like the Eurodam that I was on for the group cruise and the New Amsterdam. Then there's Vista class ships. They carry 1,964 guests, like the Zederdam. Then they have 2 smaller ships, the Zaandam and the Volendam, that take 1,432. But as you can see, while the newest are bigger ships, they're not particularly massive, especially versus the competition in the same category, like Princess and Celebrity moving into way bigger ships. And the bigger ships, I think, have brought some really interesting innovation. So as I mentioned earlier, they have the more music walk venues. They've also introduced the Grand Dutch Cafe, which everybody on the group who've been on those ships absolutely loves. It's a great place for coffee, snacks, and people watching, and it's in a really great location. They have a much more innovative and high-tech world stage as well, which is brilliant. They also have a dedicated Club Orange dining room, which is a big plus for those in suites or those people who are on the Club Orange package, which I will talk about later. And they've also introduced 12 solar cabins, so there are definitely some upsides in the move to slightly bigger ships. The other big upside, I think, is that Holland America, as they move bigger, have not joined the ship within a ship trend that even lines like Princess have introduced within their new Sphere class, Celebrity has with the Treat, and of course Cunard has with their grills. This is where large sections of the ship are closed off with access only to those traveling in suites. Holland America does not have, for example, a dedicated suite-only deck. And while they do have the Neptune Lounge for suite guests, it's pretty small and it's out of the way. So they haven't created lots of separate areas closed to other non-suite guests. In fact, the area that the suite guests eat in is called Club Orange, which on ships other than the 3 large Pinnacle class ships is basically just a section in the main dining room. Any grade of passenger from inside to balcony cabins can pay a small Club Orange add-on fee as little as $15 or £12 per day per person to dine in Club Orange too. And you get other perks like priority embarkation, disembarkation, dedicated fast-track lines for guest services and shore excursions and various other perks. So anybody can do that. The ships also have the Retreat Cabanas deck that again anyone can hire rather than a deck just for suite guests. So for example, on the group cruise, one of the attendees, Kimberly, she'd combined a good value inside cabin by booking a Retreat Cabana, and that combination cost her less than the next grade up. And gave her great outside space during the day, but the value of an inside cabin. So I feel that while people are complaining about these 3 big changes in Holland America, it's not all bad news. And the group and I agreed we still had a great time, and so much so that I've chosen Holland America to do my next group cruise, which is a Panama group cruise based on this trip. But if you're not sure about Holland America, join me over in this video, where I look at which cruise lines are being rated highest by cruisers today, starting with one that really surprises me. See you over there.